When was the last time you truly prayed? I'm not talking about those automatic, memorized prayers that come out of your mouth without passing through your heart. I'm talking about stopping everything, closing your eyes, and really talking to God. Think for a moment. Can you remember? Maybe it was weeks ago, maybe months, or maybe years. I'm not here to judge you. I know how it is. Life rushes by, the day dawns, and we're already swallowed up by tasks, bills, and worries. And when night falls, we're so tired we can barely think. Prayer is postponed, and later never comes. Today, we live in a kind of spiritual numbness. People are alive, but disconnected. They function, but they don't feel. There's a void that no promotion, no like, no Netflix series can fill. And you know what I learned? That prayer is not a religious ritual. It's not about repeating pretty words or following a script. Prayer is a conversation. It's the simplest and most profound act there is, talking to God. And today, I want to tell you a story, a true story, about someone very close to me. My brother. His name is Paulo, and what happened to him changed not only his life, but mine too. Paulo was always the more serious brother, the more upstanding, the one who woke up early, worked late, and never complained. From a young age, he carried the world on his shoulders as if it were his personal obligation to solve everything. He worked in offices, then started his own small business. He struggled, he toiled from dawn to dusk, and he managed, in fits and starts, to build something. But the price was high. Paul became an empty man. Not that he didn't have achievements, he did. He had a car, a small house that was his own, and a few regular clients. But when you looked into his eyes, you didn't see a sparkle. You saw fatigue. You saw a burden. He lived a routine that consumed him. He'd wake up at 5 in the morning, drink coffee alone, work until 8 or 9 at night. He'd get home, heat something up in the microwave, watch something on TV without paying attention, and then pass out on the couch. Weekend? More work. Family. He showed up at parties, but he was always distracted. His mind always elsewhere. Friends, almost none. He became so isolated that, little by little, people stopped calling him. And me. I tried. I called, texted, invited him for coffee. Sometimes he'd come, but it was like talking to someone far away, even sitting right next to me. Paul no longer believed in anything. He had been raised in a Catholic family, like me. We went to Mass with our mother, prayed before bed, and had that basic religious education. But Paulo, over time, became more distant. He said that prayer didn't change anything, that God, if he existed, didn't care about the lives of little people like us, that the world was too harsh to believe in divine goodness. I didn't agree, but I didn't force it either. Everyone has their own path, right? But things started to get worse. First, there was the loss of our father. Dad died of a heart attack, suddenly, without warning. Paulo was at work when he heard the news. He dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. When he arrived, our father's body was already covered by a white sheet. I saw my brother fall apart that day. But after the funeral, he hardened. He didn't cry anymore. He didn't talk about it. He simply swallowed his pain and moved on. Months later, his business began to falter. Clients disappeared. Bills fell behind. And he had to lay off his only employee. Paulo spiraled into a seemingly endless spiral of stress and anxiety. He started having insomnia, sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling, thinking about debts, failures, everything that went wrong. He lost weight. He became pale. His eyes, once tired, now seemed dull. I tried to talk, but he deflected. "I'm fine, bro. It's just a phase." But it wasn't just a phase. Paul was getting lost, and the worst part, he didn't know how to ask for help. Not from me, not from anyone, much less from God. When I asked him if he had prayed, if he had asked for strength, he laughed disdainfully. Pray? For what? To talk to yourself. That hurt me, because I knew that, deep down, he wanted to believe. But he was so afraid of being disappointed again that he preferred not to try. It had been years since he had prayed. It had been years since he had spoken to God. And I saw my brother sinking, and I didn't know how to help. It was on a Saturday night that I realized that things were really serious. Paulo called me. It was almost midnight. He never called at that hour. I answered with a heavy heart. "Hey bro, are you awake?" His voice was different. Weak, shaky. "Yes, I am." "What happened?" Silence. Paul, I'm not okay. That gave me chills, because Paulo never admitted weakness. Never. Where are you? At home. I'll be right there. I grabbed the car keys and left. 20 minutes on the road, my heart racing, praying quietly that he was okay. When I arrived, the house was dark. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. I knocked on the door. Finally, he opened it. What I saw broke me. Paulo was a wreck. His eyes were red. His hair was disheveled. His clothes were wrinkled. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in just a few months. I walked in. The house was a mess. Dirty glasses, scattered papers, bills piled high. "Sit down," he said, his voice trailing off. I sat and waited. He stood with his back to me, looking out the window. "I can't take it anymore." Those words came out of him like a stifled sob. "I wake up every day and I see no reason. I work. And for what? For nothing. To pay the bills, to survive. And I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm empty." He turned to me, and his eyes were shining with unshed tears. "I feel a weight inside." He pounded his chest. "That won't go away. It's like something's locked me up inside. I can't feel anything, bro. No joy, no sadness, just nothing." I got up and walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Have you ever tried talking to God?" He gave a bitter laugh. "I tried, a few days ago. I tried to pray. And what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I closed my eyes, tried to speak, but it was like trying to scream underwater. The words wouldn't come out, and when they did, they were empty. I felt nothing. It was like talking to myself. I took a deep breath. I knew what he was feeling, because I'd been there too. "Paul, you know what I think? I think you're trying to pray with your mind, but prayer doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the heart. My heart is dead, bro." "It's not. It's just locked." He looked at me, confused. "Think about it. How many years has it been since you really talked to God? How many years did you spend ignoring him, blaming him, saying he doesn't exist or doesn't care? You locked the door, and now you're trying to break it down all at once." Paulo sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. "But I don't know how to do that." "You don't need to know. You just need to try. Again, and again, and again, until the door opens." Silence. "God didn't turn away from you, Paul. You turned away from him. And now you're afraid to come back because you think he's abandoned you. But he never has. He's always been there, waiting." My brother began to cry. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of exhaustion, of someone who had carried too much weight for too long. I sat down next to him and stayed there, in silence, just being present. Because sometimes, we don't need words. We just need someone to stay. That night, Paul didn't pray, but something inside him began to move. In the days that followed, I stayed close. I called every day. I stopped by his house when I could. And always, somehow, I brought up the subject. "Have you tried talking to God today?" At first, he avoided the issue, but little by little, he began to admit it. "I tried, but it's still difficult. Keep trying." A week later, he called me. "I think I'm feeling something like this." Today I prayed, or tried to, and in the middle of praying, I felt something strange, like someone had touched me. It was quick, but it was real. I smiled. "God is listening to you, bro." And he was. The turning point came on a Thursday. Paulo told me later, his eyes still red, but different, lighter. He had just lost a major client. He was the one who kept the account stipulated. Without him, the business would have sunk completely. Paulo returned home in the middle of the afternoon, locked the door, and collapsed. He cried. He cried like he hadn't cried since our father died. He cried out of anger, frustration, exhaustion. And in the midst of that crying, in the midst of that internal chaos, he did something he hadn't done in years. He knelt down. It wasn't a rational decision. It was an impulse, a last cry of desperation. And he began to speak. "God, I don't know if you're listening to me. I don't know if I deserve you to listen to me. But I need help. I can't carry this alone anymore. I can't take it anymore." The words came out brokenly, mixed with sobs. "I know I walked away. I know I said horrible things. I know I doubted everything. But I'm here now, and I need you. I need to feel like I'm not alone." And then, something happened. Paulo described it as a physical sensation, a warmth in his chest, a presence. as if someone had entered the room and placed a hand on his shoulder. He opened his eyes, startled. There was no one there, but the feeling remained, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. It wasn't a peace that solved problems. It wasn't a peace that paid the bills, but it was a peace that said, "You are not alone." Paulo remained there, on his knees, for almost an hour, crying, talking, listening to the silence. And when he got up, something had changed. He called me that night. "I really prayed today." I smiled. "And how was it?" It was real. From that day forward, Paul began to pray every day, not out of obligation, not as a ritual, but because he needed to. Because prayer became the only moment of the day when he felt whole. He didn't use fancy words. He didn't memorize psalms. He simply talked. "Lord, today was difficult, but thank you for giving me the strength to wake up. God, I don't know how I'm going to solve this, but I trust in you. Dad, help me be a better person." Simple, sincere, real. And little by little, Paulo began to change. Not overnight. It wasn't magic, but it was real. He smiled again. Small smiles, but genuine. He started sleeping better. Not every night, but some. He started calling his friends again, accepting invitations, living. He once told me, "It's as if I had spent years in a dark room, and prayer was the window I opened." The light didn't come in all at once, but little by little, it became clearer. I saw my brother reborn, not because his life got easier. It remained difficult. He still had debts. He still had problems. He still had bad days. But he was no longer alone. He had God. And that changed everything. There is a phrase from Padre Pio that I always reminded Paulo of. Prayer is the oxygen of the soul. And that's exactly what was happening. Paul was breathing again. He started going to church again, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to, because he found peace there. He began reading the Bible, not as a rule book, but as a love letter. And he began sharing his experience with friends, with acquaintances, with anyone who would listen. I discovered that God was always there. It was I who was far away. And that sentence sums it all up. Today, almost 2 years later, Paulo is a different man. He still faces challenges. The business still has its ups and downs. He still has bills to pay. He still has bad days. But his posture changed completely. He is no longer that desperate man, alone, carrying the world on his shoulders. He's a man who knows he's not alone, who has someone to trust, who has a place to rest. And something incredible happened. A few months ago, Paulo told me a story that made me cry. He was in desperate financial straits. He had a large debt coming due and no money to pay it. He prayed, he asked for help, and he left it in God's hands. The next day he got a call. It was an old client, someone he'd worked with years ago. The guy called out of the blue, asking if Paulo could take on a new project, a big one, urgent. Paulo accepted. He did the work. He received exactly the amount he needed to pay off the debt. Coincidence? Maybe. But for Paulo, it was a sign. And do you know what he told me? Prayer didn't change the world around me, but it did change you. And when I changed, the world began to make sense. That's the power of prayer. It's not a magic wand. It's not a wish to the genie in the lamp. Prayer is the act of reconnecting with the source of life, with the one who created you, with the one who loves you unconditionally. And when you reconnect, everything changes. You don't get rid of problems, but you do get rid of despair. You are not free from pain, but you are free from loneliness. You don't get rid of fear, but you do get rid of paralysis, because you know you're not alone. Paul prays every day today, in the morning, before he begins his day, at night, before he sleeps, and whenever he needs to, in the midst of chaos. And he always says, "I discovered that God doesn't want performances. He wants truth. He wants you, just the way you are, broken, confused, tired. He wants you, and you can have it too. Regardless of your religion, regardless of your beliefs, regardless of how long it's been since you spoke to God, you can start today. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and talk. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be true. God, I need help." That's already a prayer. God, I don't know if you hear me, but I want to believe. That's already a prayer. try, even if it's just a whisper. 10. So I ask you again, how long has it been since you spoke to God? How long has it been since you actually stopped and talked? Silence is also a spiritual language. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is the one in which you say nothing. You just stay there, present, open. I learned from my brother's story that prayer isn't about the right words. It's about an open heart. It doesn't matter if you're at rock bottom. It doesn't matter if you doubt yourself. It doesn't matter if you think you don't deserve it. God is waiting for you. He always waited, and He will always wait. Prayer is not a miracle that changes everything outside of you. It is the force that transforms everything within of you. So today, now, before closing this video, I invite you, talk to God, not tomorrow, not after, now. It can be silent, it can be loud, it can be crying, it can be smiling, but speak. And if you'd like to delve even deeper into this journey of prayer and spiritual connection, I've left you a gift in the pinned comments. A complete ebook on how to develop a true and transformative prayer life. Download it. It's free. Thank you for listening to me this far. May God bless you. And remember, you are not alone. Never was.